And this guy, Gustavo Petro, not only was he part of this terror organization, what's happening in Colombia and the fact that he is now the president, that he says, you know what, we don't want to happen to us in Colombia what happened to Venezuela. And he falsely blames what happened in Venezuela on the fact that he says Venezuela relied on oil. And what happens when you rely on oil is the devastation you see in Venezuela. And I read this, I hear him say this, and I think, okay, do you really think the Colombian people are that stupid that they look at Venezuela and think, oh yeah, oil was the problem? It's not Maduro, the socialist dictator who tried to control prices, who tried to enrich himself and his friends and, redistribute wealth and confiscate private property and ruin their constitutional protections. None of that was the problem. It was the oil. It was the fossil fuels, guys. This is what's so funny about the radical left in our country and abroad is they think we're so stupid that they can blame all problems, usually that stem from radical leftist, Marxist, socialist, communist ideology on fossil fuels. This is why their favorite cry is climate change. And this is what Gustavo Petro is doing too. He says, we want in Colombia to pivot away from having an oil-centric economy to one that focuses on climate change. And this obviously is an enormous red flag. But it's actually more sinister than just, oh, wow, this radical leftist got elected in Colombia, because it shows us what disarray American foreign policy is and what that means. And when I say it's a reflection of American foreign policy, we have to kind of back up or zoom out for a second, because think about Ronald Reagan and how he described America's influence, not necessarily the actual political alliances that we have with other countries, but just our existence as the world superpower. But the world superpower that is so because we've embraced liberty. He called us the shining city on the hill. Well, what does that mean? So this phrase "shining city on a hill" reflects really the influence that the United States has, this liberty-centric influence, and how it impacts countries around the world. And we saw the impact of that because other nations around the world followed our lead. The world became the freest the world has ever been in the wake of the United States leading the way. I mean, part of it was the Industrial Revolution, where we had free market capitalistic principles that impacted countries all around the world. I mean, and obviously this isn't just prosperity in the economic sense. That's an intangible thing. This also lifted people out of poverty. It increased the quality of healthcare. It increased the quality of education. It helped people. It raised people up. This was an incredible influence that couldn't have been done had we, the United States, not been the leader here. And that particularly filtered down to Central and South America, to Latin America, where our principles of freedom were what were followed, the American century. And what's happening now, if we look at what's happening now, whether it was first in Venezuela, whether it's in Brazil, or it's very clearly happening right now in Colombia, Latin America is still following the lead of the United States. But the lead of the United States, the principles that we're leading with, aren't the principles of free market capitalism and prosperity that helps lift people up by embracing individual rights. It's Marxism. We in the United States are doing all of these awful things. We are embracing revisionist history with the 1619 Project. We're embracing racial division, racialized Marxism, really, with critical race theory. We embraced the Black Lives Matter movement. We to a certain extent, embraced Antifa. The Antifa riots were barely condemned by the left. They really secretly or not so secretly appreciated these assaults on our government institutions, on our cultural mores. We're doing these Marxist things in our country. At least the left is, and the left is in charge of our government institutions and in charge of many of our cultural institutions. So it seems to the world that these are the principles being embraced by the United States. We are still, for better or for worse, the world's example that they follow. The difference is we here in the United States have recourse when our politicians, when Biden or Gavin Newsom or Kathy Hochul or Gretchen Whitmer, whoever it may be, Governor Cuomo, when these people overstep their authority, when they embrace policies that are antithetical to our Constitution, or they just hurt us, they're just bad, unwise policies, we can vote them out. We have recourse. We also have this balance of power in our three separate but equal branches, the executive, the legislative, and the judicial, where if one person in one branch oversteps, the other two are supposed to balance it out. These other countries in Latin America do not have the brilliant governmental setup that we do. And so the repercussions of embracing Marxism, embracing racial division, embracing equity and diversity and inclusion and climate change, that's going to hurt them a lot more. And not just their governments, not just their intangible, numbers on a column, their GDP. It's going to hurt the people.